Hi students, my name is Akshay Kodolkar, and so this lecture for BCA second sem on statistical method. So in a previous two classes we discussed the fourth chapter, which is the statistical investigation and data representation. Okay, so we saw the meaning as well as the it's classified into two broad types, which is the descriptive statistics and the inferential statistics. So as well as the functions of statistics. Okay, so characteristics of statistics, what are the importance and scope of statistics, all these things we saw in the last lectures. So now in this session we are going to see related to the data. Okay, so you know the wording by data. So data means what? It is the information. Okay, so the information is very important for the statistical for the analysis of the statistic with the using the statistical tools. Okay, so and for the investigation or for the enquiry, okay, for the investigation or for the enquiry, it means for the search of knowledge. Okay, so it's investigation and the enquiry is required for the search for the knowledge. So as well as statistical enquiry, it means what? Search for knowledge through the statistical method. Okay, so it means what? Statistical enquiry means what? Search for the knowledge through the statistical method. With the using of the statistical method, the information is searched. Okay, so this is about the something about the data. And so now see what by it means what's the data collected must be numerical or the quantitative expression. If you want to use the method of the statistical method, then the quantitative data or you can say the numerical data is required, it is the must. Okay, so now see what in by data. So the first step in any statistical inquiry is to collect the necessary and sufficient data relating to the investigation and the study. The collected data should be quantitative. Okay, so that is numerical in nature, so that we can apply conveniently the statistical method in presentation, analysis and interpretation of the same. Okay, so it means for the what for the search of the knowledge. Okay, for the search of the knowledge, the inquiry and the investigation is the needed. Okay, earlier I said, and for that purpose if you want to use the statistical method, the quantitative or the numerical data is required. That's it. Okay, okay, so now one more thing is what? There are two main sources of data. Okay, so how to collect the data? By the way of the two sources. And which are those two sources? First one is what's the primary data, and second one is what's the secondary data. Okay, first one is what's the primary data, and second one is what's the secondary data. Okay, so these two sources are there to collect the data. Okay, so now see what in by primary data. Okay, so the primary data means what? Primary data are those data which are collected by an investigator himself for the first time for his own purpose, is nothing but what's the data. Okay, so anyone the investigator who is collecting the first time. Okay, he is collecting the first time for his only purpose. Okay, for his. Okay, so is nothing but the primary data. Okay, so the data is collected by the investigator for the first time. Okay, it's very first time, so it's nothing but the primary data. Or it you can say the data should be the fresh or data should be the raw material. Okay, so it means what's the first hand or original in a character. Okay, so as well as it is reliable and accurate, the collection requires more fun, time and energy. For this purpose, collection of this primary data, no, the more time is required. Okay, more fund is required. Fund means what? The more money is required, energy is required. All these things are required for collection of these primary data, because the investigator is collecting the first time. Okay, and so there are so many ways are there to collect the data. Okay, so the keep in mind one thing is related to the primary data is what? The data is collected by the first time or by the fresh. Okay, or in a fresh character. Okay, so for the himself. Okay, the, or you can say the primary data, it's refers to the first hand data gathered by the research himself. Okay, researcher by the himself. Okay, and so the major methods of collection of this primary data, there are so many methods are there of the primary data. By the way of the survey we can collect the data, by the way of the observation we can collect the data, by the way of the experiments by the collect the data, by the questionnaire, by the personal interview, etc. There are so many methods are there to collect the primary data. Okay, so this is about the primary data. Next, second one is what's the secondary data. So now what do you mean by secondary data? The secondary data are those data which are collected already by some other person and which are usually published. Okay, so the secondary data is nothing but what's it means, what's the data collected by someone else earlier. Okay, which is means first time collect the data and third party again they are going to using that data is nothing but for that third party is nothing but for the secondary data. Okay, suppose X person already used the data and the Y person again their data is going to use, so this is it means what's for the Y purpose, this is the secondary data. Okay, so it is the secondary data and there are so many methods are there for the collection of the secondary data. So which are those methods are there to collect the secondary data? By the way of the government publications. First of all government will use that data, they will know that data, then it will be the publish. Okay, and the publish is it is useful for the research purpose then. Okay, so this is the second data for the researchers. Okay, websites are the secondary data, books are the secondary data, journal articles are the secondary data, internal records are the secondary data. Okay, so annual report of companies, okay, census data, etc, etc, these are the secondary data. Okay, so these are the two sources of the collection of the data. The first one is what's the primary data and second one is what's the secondary data. These are the two sources of collection of the data. Okay, so now we will see the in the next slide, just see the distinction between the primary data and the secondary data. Okay, so these are the basis of comparison points are there of the difference of the primary data and the secondary data. Okay, so first one is what's the meaning. Okay, meaning of the primary data and the meaning of the secondary data. So what you know the what is the meaning of the primary data? So primary data, it refers to the first hand data and it's gathered by the research himself, is nothing but what's the primary data. Okay, so but what's the secondary data? It's the meaning of the secondary data is what's the it is collected by the someone else earlier, is nothing but what's the secondary data. Okay, so this is the meaning difference. Next one is what's the data, and so the data in the primary method in the primary data, so primary data are fresh and the new material. Okay, so it is what's the primary data are the fresh and the new materials, but in the secondary data, the second data are worked over and finished products. Okay, so it is already worked and it's the finished products, it is related to the data. So next it is related to what's the process. Okay, so process is the third point, and the process it is in the primary data, it's very involved. Okay, so much process is there for this to collect of the primary data. Okay, so it must too much we should the involve to collect the primary data, it means for the process. And in the second data we can get the quick and the in a easy way, we can get the in a quick way. Okay, so this is about the process. Next, sources. So already I told the sources of the collection of the primary data as well as the second data. So there are so many sources are there to collect the primary data. For example, the surveys, observations, experiments, questionnaire, personal interview, etc, etc. And for the second data, the government publications, websites, okay, journal articles, okay, census data, internal records, okay, reports of the companies. These are the what's the sources of the secondary data. Okay, so next one is what's the cost. Okay, so you know that. Okay, so what the for the collection of the primary data, no, so it's a too much cost is incurred. Okay, so much cost is required, so much money is spending to collect the raw material or to collect the first hand data. Okay, so this is the, it is expensive. Okay, but in the second data it is not the expenses, but it is the what, economically. Okay, it's not neither the cost more cost or neither the less cost, it is in the economical. Okay, so next, the collection of time. So for the collection of the primary data, it's required the too much time, but for the second data we can get the in a short way. Okay, so next, specific, the seventh point is what, the specific. So it means what, this primary data is specific to the researchers need only. Okay, it's a researchers need only, but in the secondary data, so it may or may not be specific to the researchers need. Okay, so this is the difference, as well as the accuracy and the reliability. So for the prime, whatever the collected the primary data, it's a more reliable and more it's the accuracy, but in the what, but in the secondary it is not, it is relatively less. Okay, as compared to the primary data. Okay, so this is the difference between the primary data and the second data. Okay, just try to understand. I hope you will be the understand. If you have any query with this session, you can contact me. Thank you.